Want to point out before we do that that y'all have been sitting for a little while. So feel we can't see you in the audience. So please just be intentional to take care of your body and give yourself a little stretch. And even our panelists, if you want to go off screen, you sure can. Just be kind to your body. Maybe stand up a little bit. Tara will not get distracted by you. Okay, so let's continue onward. So really quick, before I do introduce our closing keynote speaker, I want to give a really big thank you to the Nebraska Department of Education Healthy Schools program, specifically to Jessie Coffey and her team. You all had planned to have Tara as a speaker at your own event, and then COVID happened and canceled it. And you all were really kind to offer Tara's speaking space to us here at the summit. So we're so grateful to you for doing that, and to Tara for pivoting with that. So without further ado, so Tara Brown is known as the Connection Coach. She's an award-winning educator, author, and international speaker whose 32-year professional journey has taken her from rural Florida to gang territory in California and to one of the largest high schools in Tennessee with over 43 countries represented. Her international engagements have included Dubai and Beirut, training both educators and students. Tara believes strongly in the power of connections and that a major key to reaching kids is the ability to build positive relationships. Whether here or abroad, Tara's passion and humor continues to drive her work and to better equip adults and the ability to connect with youth in order to unleash their true potential. She is committed to helping strengthen organizations, one connection at a time. So buckle up, because you're about to get, these are her words, terrorized.
Thank you so much. And listen, I have been so looking forward to jumping in here with y'all and spending a little bit of time. Before we get started, if we were in person, I would be saying, if y'all want to bust out with an amen or a hallelujah or a woohoo because 2020 is behind us, I would ask you to do it. So if you throw that in the chat box right now, by all means, let it rip, because I'm telling you what, I am one happy woman that 2020 is in the rearview mirror. It has been crazy town on many levels, and I tell organizations all the time, we have been flying the plane and trying to build it at the same time. And the wonderful thing is, the impressive thing is that y'all have done it. And so I just want to say from the outset, thank you from the bottom of my size 11 toes, what y'all have been doing under unbelievably tough circumstances to support and serve the families, the children and the parents that y'all have been working with. I just want to say thank you. And if y'all are tired, 3-syllable tired, you are not alone. Because I've been talking to organizations all over this country and people are 3-syllable tired. And that's all right. I would say that I'm glad y'all are still standing after 2020, but I hope you're not standing. I hope you're sprawled on your couch. I hope you're reared back in your lazy boy. I hope you're comfortable and just chilling right now while we spend a little bit of time together. So I just want to share a quick story that happened when the world tilted on its axis back in the spring and we had to hunker down. I live by myself with my 2 dogs, so I hadn't been out in a while, and I had the occasion to go to a big box store, and this was just when everybody in Nashville was wearing masks. And so it was the first time that I had been out amongst the people in a very long time. And we had masks on, and I was struck in that moment of time, looking around, realizing we can't smile at each other. We can't see each other and smile at each other and have that dopamine release and have our mirror neurons stimulated. OMG, are you kidding me? That is a beautiful part of us interacting as human beings, just smiling at one another. And I had the thought, we're going to have to work even harder at connecting. We're going to have to go above and beyond and be very intentional about what we do to make sure that when we're out and about, that people realize that I see you and I'm glad and I'm smiling behind our mask. And I was walking into the big box store And like I said, I hadn't been around people in a while, and I'm thinking, okay, I need me some dopamine and I need me some human connection. And I had to go up to the front desk with the customer service. And customer service people are very nice people until they're not. And I walk to the front desk and I'm all excited about getting me a dose of dopamine. And this woman walks over to me like she's being led to her death. She has the personality of a fence post. And she's like, may I help you? And I'm like, oh, really? I'm thinking to myself, I ain't getting no dopamine. And it was that moment in time, and I talk about this all the time, that I thought, okay, it's going to be up to each one of us to decide, how do I want to impact people that I interact with on a daily basis? What is it I'm going to do during this really challenging time to allow for people to still experience something really positive with me? And so when we're thinking about 2020 and where we've been, I've been trying to hang on to the positives. I've been trying to pull out those things that really have been a plus for me. And I want y'all to go ahead and put in the chat box, what are some of the pluses that y'all have experienced? And I'll just share with you a couple. I could have pulled this shirt out of the dirty laundry hamper and ironed the front of it, and y'all would have never known. That's a beautiful thing. I have not had on heels for a month. Heck, I don't have on shoes now. My size 11 toes are happy. So that's two big pluses in my world, because I hate doing laundry and I don't like wearing shoes. So that's a plus right there. So I want y'all to put in the chat box and help me out, Shelby, with what are some of the pluses and the positives that y'all have realized. Even though we've been living in crazy town, there's some pluses. What you got?
So Tara, in there right now, it says kindness. Someone else wrote positive, more cooking and baking for more family. Someone else wrote slow down is good. Made some special memories with more family time. All righty, here they come. More family time. A big plus for our family is my husband getting a final push, being laid off due to COVID, and to start his own carpentry business. Our meals made a difference for our community. Board games, more time for house projects. Yes, family and new puppy. He is the best.
More better than puppy breath.
That's right. More family, meals together, Zoom meetings with my extended family, more time with kids.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Shelby. And listen, when we're looking at those pluses, one of the things I want y'all really thinking about with your organization is, are y'all continuing to come from a strength-based approach? And are you continuing to, in spite of the craziness, really allowing for y'all to see the good and the positive that we can pull from this? Because there's a lot that are coming out of this. And so that's one thing I just want to throw out. Can I throw some Tupac at y'all? Is it okay? Is it too early in the day? So in one of Tupac's most favorite poems, he said, you would not ask a rose that grew through the concrete why it had damaged petals. On the contrary, you'd relish in its tenacity, and you would love its will to seek the sun. The majority of years that I was teaching and coaching, I worked with under-resourced kids. I worked with those that were disadvantaged, and I absolutely worked with those that had damaged petals. And I tried really hard to make sure that I was looking beyond the damaged petals to the fact that they were seeking the sun on a daily basis. I'm the youngest of 4 kids, and my oldest sister's special needs. And so I got to sit on the 50-yard line of Melinda's life. And I got to see the concrete that she fought through every day. And I got to see the tenacity that she showed seek the sun. And I also got to see the loving adults that had an impact on her life. We lost her 3 years ago, but I'm telling you what, I had a standing phone call with her every Wednesday for years. And I was in Beirut doing some work, and I was with my colleague who lived there, and the phone rang on this Wednesday morning. And she looked at me, she goes, you're not going to answer that, are you? And I said, yeah, I've got to. She goes, girl, it's going to be it's going to be really expensive and cost you a lot with the phone exchange from United States to Beirut. And I said, girl, let me tell you what, it's going to cost me a whole lot more if I don't answer this phone, because that's my sister. And I will I will pay for it in spades. So I'm answering this phone. And so my sister and I had a special relationship. And I tell you what, up until the very last month she was on this earth, if we talked about school, she would light up like a Christmas tree talking about Mrs. Rom. Mrs. Rom had her 3 years in high school, and Mrs. Rom didn't see Melinda's damaged petals. Mrs. Rom saw the beauty that was in my sister and the gifts that she brought onto this earth in spite of her disabilities. And we're talking decades down the road that my sister's heart was touched, and it made her happy to talk about Miss Rom. And one of the things I want y'all thinking about is, what do I want my leadership footprint to be on this time period, on my organization, on the families that I'm working with? What do I want them to say 20 and 30 years from now? What do I want them to remember? What emotions do I want them to be triggered when they think about this time period and their interaction with me? Because it doesn't matter what your title is. It doesn't matter what your position is. We're all leaders in some capacity. And I'm telling you what, the world needs a whole lot more dopamine right now than ever before in my time on this earth. And that's one of the things I really want you as an individual and you as an organization saying, how are we doing slinging dopamine? How are we doing connecting in really challenging times to connect? I want to share a story. This was back in the 1980s, and the Scandinavian Airlines was struggling big time. They were on the brink of bankruptcy. And they were last among all of the airlines in three really important categories: dependability, customer service, and profitability. Those are pretty important to stay afloat. They were struggling. They brought in a man who was an expert in working with struggling corporations. And they said, yeah, Jan, we need some help. And Jan spent some time looking at the research, interviewing customers, interviewing employees, going through all the data to try to figure out, why is this airline struggling? And he sat down with the upper leadership when he finally got an idea of what the deal was. And he said, here's the situation last year. There were 10 million people that chose to fly on Scandinavian Airlines. And he said, from the time they got to the airport until they got to their destination, they interacted with, on average, 5 somebodies in the Scandinavian organization in some capacity. He said, so really, we had 50 million opportunities last year to connect with the customers. And he said it wasn't happening. And he said, on average, those interactions with those 5 different Scandinavian employees lasted about 15 seconds. And in those 15 seconds, the customers weren't feeling seen or heard or validated. They didn't feel important. He said, so here's what we're going to do. From now on, we're going to take care of those 15 seconds. He said, we're going to start calling them moments of truth. And whatever position you are in Scandinavian Airlines, if you happen upon a customer, we're going to tear up those 15 seconds. Everything that we do, the way we say it, our intonation, our facial expression, we're going to make eye contact. We're going to sling the dopamine. Well, they probably didn't say sling the dopamine, but they were slinging the dopamine. They just didn't know that that's what they were calling it. He said, we're going to take care of those moments. And he said, I guarantee you this, if I have an organization-wide commitment to do that, he said, y'all aren't going anywhere, let alone bankrupt. And so from that moment on, leadership all the way down started being present when they were interacting with customers. They started checking themselves and their body language and their energy and how they were showing up. And in 365 days, 1 year's time, Scandinavian Airlines went from the bottom, almost dying, all the way to the top in those 3 categories. The reason is that we are hardwired to connect. We as human beings are hardwired to connect. And it's when we have great relationships and connections and have that feeling of togetherness that we are at our best and we thrive. And when we're talking about taking care of moments of truth, it doesn't take a lot. It doesn't take a lot to release dopamine. It doesn't take a lot when we have those moments, because it might be 3 seconds or 3 minutes of conversation. When you walk into a family's home, when you have a child come into your office, when you have an occasion to have conversations or interactions, they could be short, but those moments of truth add up. And those moments of truth are what's going to lead to your leadership footprint legacy 20 and 30 years down the line. That's one of the beauties of us with this environment of which we cannot control. We can control that. We can control how we show up and how others feel when they're interacting with us. And that's one thing I really want y'all to think about in your time here and conversations afterwards is, how are we doing? How am I doing? Am I taking care of myself? Am I carving out you time? Have y'all ever noticed the more stressed you are, the less adorable your own children are? Anybody? Anybody? Your own pets? Your partner? Your wife? Your husband? Ever notice that? It's inversely proportional. I was at the high school most of my career. Okay. First of all, teenagers aren't that adorable on the best of their days when they're going through all whatever they're going through. Okay. So I was dealing with that in addition to everything going on. But I knew that if I wasn't taking care of myself and my stress level got up here and the cortisol was flying around and I hadn't got enough dopamine and oxytocin in my system, it might not go well. Tell me this, put it in the chat box. Do you have a personality in your, I call my personality in my head, my girl on the bench. She just sits on the bench of my life and just has a running commentary of things she sees. She could be really funny. She could be really insightful. She could be really snarky. And as long as she stays on the bench in my mind, nothing comes out of my mouth. Does anybody have that personality? Is that just me? I need to bump up my medication. Am I alone in the wilderness, or because I asked that question one time and I heard a lady scream in the back, "Oh, don't worry, I got 2 girls on my bench. You just keep on talking." So I felt much better. So I'm hoping that some of y'all have. And what I have found is that the more stressed I get, the more my girl on the bench wants to go ahead and not even check into the scorer's table of my life. She doesn't want to take off her jacket, her warm-up jacket. She just wants to run out on the field of my life and handle it. And oftentimes she's coming off the bench telling me, "Oh, I got this, don't worry." And there she goes. And then it's all off the rails. Anybody? When I'm talking about how we're showing up, we got to keep our girl on the bench. We got to make sure we're taking care of ourselves so that we're present when we're having those opportunities to sling dopamine and connect with people. I remember this one day I was teaching and I had planning period, and I was going down the hallway. Now I got long legs. I'm 6 foot tall. I can move. Okay. And I was probably in a hurry trying to find a copier in the whole dang building that worked. Anybody feel that pain? So I'm on a mission, okay? And I'm missing opportunities to talk to kids, say hi, sling dopamine. I'm just in my head. And one of my own students stopped me and he said, "Miss B, what's wrong?" And I came out of the fog and I said, "Excuse me?" He said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "Nothing, darling. Why?" He said, "Oh, you look really mad." And I said, "I do?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Thank you for telling me that. I appreciate it." And I walked back to my room and I thought, I have never thought about what I look like when I'm not thinking about what I'm looking like. And you know what I realized? It ain't pretty. I got little beady eyes. My mouth turns down. I got a big old teacher stare, coach's stare. I can be intimidating. I don't want to be any of that. And so that was a moment in time where I put into my action plan, my growth plan, my commitment, my line in the sand, my daily commitment. When I leave my classroom, I am going to try my hardest to make sure I stop. I take a deep breath. I get grounded. I get present. My eyes are up. And I'm walking through that hallway, making sure that there's not a chance in the world that there's a child that's not going to get a dose of dopamine from me, not going to get a high, pop upside the back of their head. "Hello, how's the game?" Good luck on the debate team, competition, whatever it is. That was my area of growth that I needed to do, because we're all energy and our energy impacts other people. And there was not a chance in the world that I wanted anything about my body, my facial expression, anything to say I'm not emotionally safe for you to approach. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about those moments in time allow for your leadership legacy to be put down. It's those little moments. I want to share a book. If you've not read this book, it's old. You can probably get it for 99 cents on Amazon used. It's called Mentors, Masters, and Mrs. McGregor. Mentors, Masters, and Mrs. McGregor. And the author asked people from all over the country to write her a letter of a moment in their educational journey that had a huge impact. And there were famous people and not famous people, and there were long letters and short letters. And the shortest letter that I saw in that book was about that long. And it was from a 50-year-old, and it just said anonymous. So I don't know if it was a man or woman, but I thought it was really profound that a 50-year-old had an occasion that impacted them so much that they stopped their life to write this letter. And this is what the letter said. In third grade, my music teacher noticed me. She smiled at me and acknowledged that I was there. This was unlike any other teacher that I had had or my parents. That feeling has stayed with me my entire life. That is a moment of truth right there. That is a music teacher in third grade that allowed for that child to feel seen and heard and validated because she was present and she smiled at that little boy or girl. And one of the things I'm going to encourage you in your humongous life of spinning a gazillion plates is to figure out, number one, are there any plates I can take off the pole? And if I've got all these plates, what am I going to do to make sure that in those moments of interaction with other people, that I'm present and I don't miss the opportunity to connect? I want to share my screen if I can. And I want you to take a look at this. I about cried when I saw that. That's not in that man's job description. What that is a man that understands that when he takes time out of his day to interact with those sweet little babies and to make them giggle and to make them have fun in that moment of time, those 15, 20, 30 seconds they have with them, guess what? Their cortisol levels coming down. They're skipping to class, happy. Their brain is in a place of being able to take in information and higher level cognition because he has helped in that moment of time take care of those moments of truth and allowed for them to feel connected. And that's one of the things I want us to keep doing more of during this time is grabbing hold of those little moments. Before things totally shut down, I had a chance to go out to Phoenix and I worked with a group in person, a school in person. And we were talking about how difficult some of this time period is depending on your personality. And if you're a perfectionist or you're a person that is very detail oriented and you have your lists and everything needs to go as planned, this could really rock your world because this is not what's 2020 and 2021 has been. It has been a very fluid, it's going to change in 2 seconds kind of a thing. And so we were talking about that with the organization, and one of the teachers raised her hand, and I was so happy that she raised her hand because she was a 25-year veteran. And she said, "You got me. I'm one of those teachers." And she said, "And you're right. It has been hard and it has rocked my world." And she said, "But I want to share a story that happened the other day that has changed everything." And she said, "I teach third grade." And she said, "We've been all virtual." And she said, "I've been working really hard to try to stay on the pacing guide and make sure I cover the material. And this one day, one of my little boys just kept wanting to show me and the class his new dinosaur." And she said, "It was making me crazy because I didn't want to get interrupted. And he really kept wanting to show me in the class the dinosaur. And in my head, I was thinking, just put him off until tomorrow." And she said the next thought was, what's going to be different tomorrow? Just let him show you the dinosaur. And she said, so I stopped everything and I just got him up on the screen and I said, let's see that dinosaur. And she said, Tara, she said, I could not believe what happened in that virtual classroom. I cannot tell you how happy that little boy was. I cannot explain to you the energy that was happening within the kids that were talking to each other. She said, it was amazing. And she said, it made me finally realize that I've got to be willing to just flow with things and cherish those times that allow for my kids to feel more connected with one another. And she's absolutely right. And it doesn't matter what organization you're in. The same is true in prioritizing what's really important. What can I let go or readjust my expectations of and allow for this moment to be just me totally present with whoever it is I'm interacting with. I want to share a very profound quote from one of my redneck boys. I had this student in where my hometown, where I grew up, with redneck boys with belt buckles as big as their heads. It was hardcore redneck in my hometown. And he was sitting in class one day, and I guess he thought the work was pretty easy because he looked up and he's like, you know, Miss B, this ain't rocket surgery. And I said, no, darling, it's not. And there have been times I have wanted to go to the leaders and organizations and grab them by the lapel and shake the snot out of them and say, this ain't rocket surgery. You got to connect with your people. You got to sling more dopamine. You got to help your colleagues, your employees, your students, your athletes feel seen and heard and validated. One connection at a time, you could change a life. This ain't rocket surgery. I want to share with you also a study that they did in England, and they wanted to know if cows cared about being loved on. And so this one group, they took these cows, and this group over here, they just hooked them up and milked them. This group over here, they loved on them, they named them, they petted them, they sang to them, played music, thanked them for the milk, asked how their little cheerings were, whatever else you say to cows, they said it. For 10 months, they loved them up. What you think happened to the milk production of them cows that got loved on? This ain't rocket surgery either. That right there is a happy cow. That's a cow that knows it's been loved on. I ask leaders all the time, do your employees look that happy? Do your colleagues look that happy? Do your students, your teachers, your support staff look that happy? Do the people in your organization know that they've been loved on? This is neuroscience. Crazy thing is, I'm coming off stage. I gave a keynote somewhere, and there was a sweet man at the end of the steps wanting to talk to me, and he was a real quiet man, and so I had to lean in because he didn't talk very loud. I found out that he was a good old boy too, raised on a dairy farm, and he said, you know that thing about them cows? And I said, yes, sir. He said, you're spot on. I said, do tell. He said, I was raised on a dairy farm. And he said, my daddy always used to tell us, you got to be nice around them cows. You can't be too loud. You can't be mean. You can't treat them rough. He said, my daddy used to get on them cow hands, had to fire a couple of them. They just didn't understand. There'd be times I'd be walking out to the barn. My daddy'd be out there in the barn, be singing to them. And he said, ma'am, my daddy couldn't sing very good, but I don't think them cows cared. I think they liked it. And he said, you know what my daddy used to tell us all the time? You don't take milk from cows. They give it to you. And he said, I was up in the audience when you were talking. And he said, I was thinking about what else he said. He said, son, you know what happens when them cows are upset? And I said, no, Dad, what? He said, cortisol gets all up in them. Cortisol's all over them. And he said, them udders, they just lock up. And he said, son, you got to be nice to them cows. And he said, ma'am, you know what I realized? Kids and cows, they ain't much different. And I said, sir, you are spot on. Kids and cows, they ain't much different. And when we're able to be that leader that allows for our kids and our parents and our colleagues to have those places where they know for sure what to expect because we're showing up consistently. We're slinging the dopamine. We have great energy coming off of us. That's when the cortisol level can come down. And those udders or those brains ain't going to lock up when we're in that state. So I want to ask you real quickly, when we talk about being great dopamine dispensers, I want you thinking about, as the chief emotional officer, how do you show up every day? How do you show up every day? I taught teenagers the bulk of my career, okay? Let's think about that for a minute. I'll give you one better. I taught history at 7:05 in the morning to teenagers. Okay, number one, there ain't a teenager on the planet that wants to be alive and functioning at 7:05 in the morning. So I am one in the hole before the tardy bell ever rings. Two, history has not been that go-to, oh, I just love this subject kind of a subject. So I'm two in the hole before the tardy bell ever rings. Teenagers that think about sex every 4 or 5 seconds. I'm down. I got to bring something up in there other than, oh, I just love history. The energy is a huge part of it. Let me ask you this. On an enthusiasm scale to 1 to 10, enthusiasm scale. Let me get this up so you see it. On an enthusiasm scale from 1 to 10, 1, you need CPR. 10, you need a Valium. There it is. CPR, Valium. Where do you rank? Where do you rank on a daily basis so that your people that you interact with, whether they're adults or kids, can know, what am I going to get from him or her today? Because we're all energy and our energy plays off of one another. So I knew I better get it up to an 8, 9, or 10, or there wasn't going to be no learning up in there. Is that hard? Yes. When I'm on the court coaching, I better bring the energy. Is it hard? Yes. Which goes back to the self-care. But let me tell you what, when you are that leader with that leadership footprint that people can count on every day, it's a game changer. I taught in Long Beach for several years, and I was smack dab in the middle of gang territory. And I had kids literally risking their life walking to school because they were a Crip and they had to walk through blood territory or vice versa. The last thing I wanted was for them to think, oh God, I can't stand Miss B. I hate that class. No, I want them to think, if I could just get to Miss B's class, it's going to be okay. Because I know what to expect. Because I know what the energy is going to feel like. Kids from trauma, kids from chronic stress, kids that are dealing with that level of cortisol in their system all the time. They're running from lines. I say all the time, you can't read a book and run from a line at the same time. These kids are running from lines in their life. I wanted to make sure that it was a safe space with me, whether it was in my classroom or on the basketball court. I wanted to make sure, beyond a doubt, I know what to expect. I had one of my boys walk into my class one day and he was wired for sound. And I said, whoa, hang on, what's going on? And they had just had passing period. He was coming from somebody's classroom. And I said, what's going on? And I gave him a chance to decompress, took some deep breaths, got him back, got the cortisol level down. And I said, darling, what's going on? And he said, I just came from Mr. Jackson's room. I said, uh-huh. He said, Miss B, you know Mr. Jackson. And I did know Mr. Jackson. And I said, oh, darling, what happened? And he said, I never know what to expect from him. One minute he's joking around with us, and the next minute he's screaming at us. I finally said to him, dude, are you bipolar? Oh, I had a couple thoughts that went through my head. One is like, oh, that was so inappropriate that you said that to him. The second one was, what did he say? We've been thinking something's going on somewhere. Our kids and our families have this in their life all the time. They need this from us. They need this from us. Our colleagues need this from us. I want to put this up here so you could see this. I want y'all to take a picture if you want to. I want y'all to think about, that is my place right there. That's my aspiration for 2021. I want to get my Zen on. I want to get my Zen on. I want you being the stabilizing force. I want you becoming a world-class dopamine slinger. And I want you to make sure that you're slinging it like nobody's business. I want to show you a couple examples of what I've gotten from a couple of clients that I've worked with. I was so proud of this group of teachers, and they sent me this and they said, hey, we've been slinging a lot of dopamine in Sequatchie County. And here's what these teachers got together and said, what? Why don't we just put up a whiteboard and we write a question up there every week or so and just get feedback from the students who are our customers who we're serving. And this one week they put up, what kind of music do you like? Because they knew, and we talked about dopamine gets released when you're listening to music. And so they asked them and they're like, why can't we play music in the hallways, right? Why can't you play music in the hallway? We talked about that. Great, play music in the hallway. What's so cool is they asked the kids told them what kind of music they like. They compiled a whole entire playlist with those kids' songs on there. So when the kids walk through the hallways, they got to hear that. And before they ever got to the classroom door, boom, the cortisol levels down. They're feeling a whole lot better. I want to go find this woman in the cafeteria, and I just want to find this woman and hug her. She said, why can't we sling dopamine in the lunchroom? And she got a couple of Sharpies and she went to town. When we're talking about the intentionality, that's what we're talking about. Got this from a librarian. She said, hey, I've been rocking some Elton John this morning. If that don't sling some dopamine around, I don't know what does. And it's like, yes, sister, it does. When we're talking about in this craziness, what we can do, that's one of the things we can do is have that intentionality of how do I want to show up? Check this SRO out. How cool is that? Takes 15, 20 seconds to take a selfie with that little boy, and all of a sudden, maybe that's a seed that gets planted. Maybe he starts seeing cops differently. Maybe he starts feeling better about being at school that day because she took the time and had that level of presentness. So when we're talking about slinging dopamine, this is slinging dopamine. This, not so much. Let me go back. Slinging dopamine, not slinging dopamine. And one of the things I want y'all thinking about is, what do I look like when I'm not thinking about what I look like? What do I need to do to make sure that I show up in a way that is absolutely going to crush the dopamine slinging? I want to wrap up with a really quick story. I told you that I went to Long Beach and taught in gang territory, and I ended up getting hired as the boys basketball coach. And it was a really cool experience because the school backed up to a housing project called the Carmelitos Housing Project, and it was a very violent project area. Throughout the years, there were bullets that flew out onto the PE field, and the PE teachers would have to grab the kids and scramble them into the gym because of gang violence in the Carmelitos Housing Project. And right before I got there, there was a little boy that got shot by a stray bullet. And so the community got together and they erected huge wall behind the property line called the Great Wall of Lindbergh. It made national news. Well, I was stepping into this and I ended up coaching the boys basketball team, and some of my kids on the team lived in that housing project. And some of my kids knew only their little radius of their little teeny tiny neighborhood and didn't have aspirations beyond that. And when I got them over the fact that I was a female and I actually knew what I was talking about, I knew when I was looking at the team that if I could instill this, along with them feeling like a family and feeling committed to one another, and knowing that the bar was here when it came to how they dressed, how they acted, how they conducted themselves in the classrooms, in the hallways, going to games, in the locker room, I held the bar here. And I worked them hard because I wanted them to learn how to lean on each other and have a higher purpose. And I don't think I can get through this drill, but if I don't, then what? I'm letting them down. I wanted to start instilling that idea. And so throughout the season, we had a really, really good season. And throughout every single practice, we never finished a practice until I got one of my boys on the free throw line and he had to shoot a free throw that hit nothing but net. It couldn't nick the rim. It couldn't jump around and fall through. And trust me what I tell you, sometimes our practices went long, but I was not going to allow them to lower that bar. Oh, come on, coach, it just barely nicked the rim. That's right, it barely nicked the rim. That's here. This is where we're operating. And we had that family feel for the first time some of my boys experienced it never had before. And I want to show you a picture when we won the championship. And I'll give you a moment for my hair. In the South, we call that jacket up for Jesus, or hire the hair closer to God. I'm not sure what was happening with my hair, but there it is. And there's my boys. And they were so proud of those trophies and that championship. And yes, the hard work that went into it. And we had all kind of photo shoots going on. That's my biggest boy right there. My littlest boy was about 4'7". That was tan on the left with his teeny tiny feet. And they were just ecstatic to puff their chests out. There's another picture. And see that boy up at the top? That's Rick. And this was in 1990-91. Facebook wasn't around. About 8 years ago, Rick and I bumped into each other on Facebook. And I hadn't seen them since like 1992. And I saw this picture on his Facebook page and we connected. And I about fell out because that was my little boy, Rick. And he was a grown man with a child. And I'm like, oh my God, what are you doing? Where are you? Do you ever see any of the guys? Do you keep in touch with any of them? Have you seen any of them for years? And he's like, Coach, do I see any of them? He said, we still hang out together. He said, Coach, we still celebrate holidays and birthdays. And I'm sitting there unbelievably touched. And I could not believe it. And I want to share with you, and I want to close with a little bit of what he wrote to me that really emphasizes how we really never know the ripple effect of our leadership footprint. We don't know what kids are taking in, and we don't know what's going to happen decades down the line because of their interaction with us. He said, Coach, it's great to hear from you. I'm doing really well. I still live in Long Beach. He said, I graduated from Cal State Long Beach, and I've been a mortgage broker for the past 9 years. And he went through and he told me what the other guys were doing. He said, I still talk to Robert and Arvin and Tan and Jess and Hassani. And he told me where they worked and what they were doing. And he said, I want to thank you for instilling the importance of hard work in all of us. It made a difference of where we are today. And he said, I still catch Robert and Arvin at the gym. And we joke about how good we thought we were back at Lindbergh Middle School. And he said, thanks to you, we still won't leave the gym until one of us hits a free throw that does not touch the rim. To say that I had a big fat fall apart would be minimizing my sobbing. I couldn't believe it. And it touched me in a way that I had not experienced in so very long. But it really did instill what I know to be true. And that is what Peggy Milan said years ago. And that is, we never touch another so lightly that we do not leave a trace. The question is, what's the trace that you're going to leave on those moments of truth with your colleagues and your employees and your parents and your kids that you're working with and serving? I'm just going to ask you that you as an organization and you as an individual just commit to making sure that every person's day is better because they interacted with you, and y'all go sling that dopamine. Thank y'all so much.
Give a round of applause to Tara. Tara, thank you so much. Thank you. Oh, Tara, we will circle back to do Q&A. To those who are attending, please use the question and answer for questions you have for Tara. I'm going to pass the baton over to Jessie Coffey. She's got a special guest for reflection, and we'll circle back for questions after they're done. Jessie, nice to see you.
Thank you for having me here. I want to introduce our special guest. We have Judy Pullman. She's the food service director at Wayne Community Schools, and she is going to share with us her story about how she uses her leadership potential to engage both staff and students in amazing work to support the whole child in Wayne. So everybody can see my screen. Shelby, you want to give me a thumbs up, right? You're good. And then Judy, if you just want to give me a little head nod or something, and I'll advance your slides for you.
Jesse, we can see your screen, but it's not in present mode. So we can see everything on the side too.
Can do. There we go.
Beautiful. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Tara. That was awesome. I've been a lunch lady, and I'm okay being a lunch lady for 37 years, I think. Feeding kids is a wonderful opportunity. You can change. I'll nod, Jesse, but I nod when I talk, so that this is difficult. Wayne is a small school. I consider small school. We have 2 schools, one K-6 and the other is 7-12. And then we send meals to Head Start, Tower, ESU, and St. Mary's. The farm to school has been an opportunity for me to grow with the kids a little bit. You can go to the next slide. Maybe. So one way that we make sure that every day's better because we cross paths. When you're at a family reunion, where do you gather? It always seems like everybody's in the kitchen. And if you ever noticed your mom or grandma was always happier when all the kids are home, it's like they do a head count. Well, lunch ladies are much the same way. We want everyone to gather in our kitchen and our lunchrooms. And I've always said, make a smile, make a connection with those kids because you don't know what happened on their way to school that morning for breakfast. As a mom, I can tell you, well, I never was really at home for the kids for breakfast because I was at school making lunch, but mornings are get up, get going, get going, get going, get going, and they finally get to school. And then the last thing they need is a lunch ladies frowning at them and saying, get your food and get them moving. They need a smile. They need a good morning and a please and thank you. And it's amazing how many kids return the smile and the please and thank you. And I have to admit, the mask, you feel like you're smiling, but you don't know if the kids realize it. And then I think they must see it in my eyes. We're the only place that we never grade in the school. You know, we didn't give you a grade on how well you eat or you clean your tray, but they give me a grade on whether it was good or bad. Like grandma's chili doesn't have that kind of beans in it or just different things, but that's okay because I would tell my mom whether I liked it, and that's my role. Go ahead, Jesse. We are the stabilizing force. Every day the kids know that there's going to be a meal there for them, and sometimes I change up the menu. I've always been fortunate that I had an administration that let us continue with home cooked food. They didn't say start buying bread. So we do bake bread every day, and the smell of the meat and the bread going throughout the school system. The farm to school, the beef, one of my former students came up to me or had her husband come up and said, why don't we start this beef to school, Judy? And I said, well, I don't know, no one's asked. Do you think they'll tell the difference? And this year we've done almost all local beef. It has been incredible. And that's probably one of my relaxation nights is when we have a beef to school meeting, because it might be beef and beverage and we sit around and communicate, but it's a relaxation point. And it has been a great teaching tool for parents and the kids. If you want to go ahead to the next slide. Carving out you time. So this was a pepper that we got from a local farmer, and when one of the cooks cut it, it had a little smiley face. And I think that's, you have to find little things. Most of us aren't going to go to a trip, a major trip, but if you can't, today I was taking the garbage out and another cook was taking recycling out, and we could hear the geese, and it's gorgeous out today. And okay, taking the garbage out isn't maybe the most exciting job, but on a day like today, when you can hear the geese and the birds, and it was so terrible cold last week, it's the little things that charge your tank. Last week, one of the preschool kids said they wanted vegetable gravy. And the para said vegetable gravy. Well, I guess Hidden Valley or ranch dressing, which, you know, everything's better with ranch. It's the new ketchup for this generation. That was what they wanted, was vegetable gravy. So it's the little smiles, the little things that, you're right. I like to go outside. I like, not when it's cold though. I am a fair weather. I do like to garden. So doing the farm to school and teaching the kids where a fresh green bean, a canned green bean, or a frozen green bean, find which green bean you like and eat it. But at least you know where it started from. Engaging the next. So Wayne just started an FFA program. When I started, I was going to be a home ec teacher. And then I realized I couldn't really teach sewing extremely well without being vocal. I can sew, but I have to be in the mood. And I didn't know what I was going to do. And that's how I ended up being a school cook. So the FFA program is working with the Beef to School. They have the Grow Towers, which gives us a little of the lettuce, but it's still like empowering them to give us a little of the lettuce. And it's like our lettuce is on the lunch line today. The young man in the picture, he has a cow-calf operation, and I'm hoping someday we'll be able to buy some beef from him for the Beef to School program. One of the young ladies grew up on a dairy farm. She's the dairy princess. And the other one, I think, is looking into horticulture, gardening. But working with the FFA, the FCLA, the 4-Hers come in and we do pie baking for the county fair in the summertime. And so if you start small, the seed will grow, and you just got to talk to the kids and they talk to me. I'm not Mrs. Pullman very often. I'm usually Judy, and I'm getting generations of kids. So it's like they know there's a trust. And do I do everything right? Absolutely not. You know, Jesse, don't hear this from Department of Ed, but it's like coming to the kitchen with mom, and many of my staff are the same way. And I have a couple staff that look like those 4 pictures that were up there. But you just keep trying, because I feel we're the best part of the day for the kids. However, I did like history class, so I would have been one of those at 7:05 being excited about history.
Thank you, Judy, for sharing your leadership skills and touching, you said for 30 years, you've been feeding kids and now working with the kids of the parents that you fed 30 years ago. And so what an awesome experience to have that connection with your community and the students in Wayne Community Schools. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like Judy and Tara got together beforehand, maybe like a decade ago, to work towards this. It's such a perfect match. Thank you for all you're doing, Judy. Jesse and Judy, thank you so much for that reflection time. It was much, much appreciated. It's so good to see the work that you're doing. We're going to circle back now to do question and answer time with Tara. And let's see here. I've got Holly Dingman will be up here on stage with me, and Tara. So I didn't see that we had any questions come in through the Q&A, but there was a question earlier that was sent in the chat. There's a couple actually. The first one said, how do you keep enthusiastic and connected when you may be working with others who are, quote, Debbie Downers, the opposite of enthusiasm? More of the sit down and shh. What say you, Tara?
Well, tell you what, when you have a collective energy of the majority of people in an organization, a lot of times that can sustain us when you're around those people who want to sit on the cactus and complain about the pain. or sit in the muck and not be solution oriented. It can be really frustrated. I think for me, and one of the things I've really realized during this whole 2020 pandemic craziness was that I have to be extremely careful about the energy that I let in my space. That means everything from the news to negativity to whatever it is. And I think sometimes distancing ourselves from those people. Ultimately, the leader of the organization is the one that is deciding, is this person right being on the bus, or do we need to help that person GO? And so that's another thing that I when I'm working with leaders, we talk about having courageous conversations. We talk about having lines in the sand saying, on my watch, this is always going to happen, or this is never going to happen. And sometimes it is directly connected to some of those people whose energy is not conducive to the goals and the values that we have for our organization.
Thank you. Holly, I'm going to pass to you for the next question.
Sounds great. I just first want to say thank you, Tara and Judy. I agree. I'm like, you two were coordinating on some other psychic level a decade or so ago. And just amazing. Tara, you had us laughing and crying, and Judy, thank you for being there, showing up for your students after 37, almost 4 decades. It's so incredible. So the question came in, will you say more, Tara, about the importance of authenticity in connection? Seems like a very important piece of in the recipe of connecting.
Absolutely, it's vital, because we as human beings can smell and feel inauthentic interactions, and it's built on trust. It's built on a level of, I have put enough emotional deposits in your bank account that you know that I'm invested in you. And I'll give you a really quick, perfect example. We had a new principal at the school that I was working at before I left the classroom and started doing this full time. And she was not very good at getting out of her office. And so this particular very first year, she hadn't gotten to know very many teachers other than they just work at this school. Well, she gets up in front of the faculty one day and she's praising the math department for their test scores. And I'm sitting beside one of the math teachers and I hear her mumble, I don't even think she knows my name. And so for her, that praise did not feel authentic, because this principal had not put any emotional deposits in this teacher's bank account. And so that felt for her, I'm not buying it. It doesn't feel authentic to me. And so really it is the amount of time and investment. And so when I'm working with teachers that are having struggles with a student, that's my first question. How many emotional deposits have you put in that kid's bank account? How many non-contingent conversations have you had with that child that has nothing to do with their grade and everything to do with their cool tattoo or their new shoes or them playing in the game last night? And that's where the authentic ability to connect and have the other person trust that it's real is there, is that investment. Great question.
Thank you so much, Tara. Our next question for you is actually, for those that signed up early, they got swag bags, which included fun things like putty, but there's a deck of these cards that are from you. They've got your name on them. Could you tell us a little more about these and the intended use for them?
Yes, those are little doses of dopamine or emotional deposits. That's exactly why I made those. Because when I was in the classroom, I realized that for some kids, me connecting with a written note was a really powerful connection. And so these that you're showing, I made for adults. There's a set for kids, but we need it too. We need doses of dopamine. And so there's like 12 different sayings in there. And what I always encourage people to do, because we need to get back to writing handwritten notes. We need to have that personal touch. And so what I ask is that when y'all get that set of cards, start being intentional about being aware of who you feel like might need a dose of dopamine from you, need to get an attaboy, a way to go or whatever, and then look through those 12 sayings, get that card, write a personal note on the back and give it to them. I'll give you a perfect example with those cards. I just worked with a group last week, and the director had gotten cards, and she had gone through and picked out the right card for all the teachers that were in that session. And she had gotten them to them before we had our meeting. And so I asked the adults, I said, I want y'all to share with each other and with Kim, who took all that time to do that. What did that feel like as a grown adult? How did that feel getting that card? Forget about it. I mean, tears, crying. Kim was over there getting loaded up with dopamine because they were so thankful that they know how busy she is. They know how much time it took. And for her it was a beautiful moment with both them who got it and for her to realize how absolutely profound it is. And this one woman was like, I'm gonna keep this forever. And that's what I tell teachers. Trust me when I tell you, you give that to a kid, you can find him 20 years from now. I bet you there's a good chance it's still in his wallet, still in his scrapbook, whatever. That's all it is. I create those little doses of dopamine and emotional deposits.
I love it. Doses of dopamine. Oh, I'm showing the backside. That was so awesome. Your positive attitude is contagious. Thank you so much, Tara. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. It's wonderful to have you here with us. Yes, please.
Really quickly, I want to hug Judy until her toes dangle. Oh my goodness. How do we clone her? How do we clone her? Judy, Lord have mercy. Thank you for who you are and what you have done to create such a cool environment in your lunchroom. Because historically, research says a lunchroom ain't a great place, most schools. And for those kids, number one, to be able to call you Judy and tell you you need to tweak your chili and all of the stuff you're doing for those kids. Made my day. Made my day.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much, Tara. Thank you so much, Judy. Thanks so much, Jesse. Just gratitude to you all. Well, if you all can believe it, we have done 2 days of the Nebraska Healthy Kids Summit. Look at Holly dancing. I don't know if you can still see her. But we really, you know, we're going on our 8th hour together over the course of 2 days in an online space. The last 11 minutes that we've got here, we just actually want to offer up some time of reflection to those of you that are here. Before I jump in.